Hey guys, tonight we're going back to the smoky, moss covered, fish scented world of Viking life. You won't be wielding axes or sailing fjords just yet. No, tonight you'll be waking up in a tiny Viking village on the edge of the known world. And you're not the chief. You're not even someone important. You're just you. A confused visitor in wool socks that itch, trying not to inhale too much smoke before breakfast. It's dark. Not early morning dark, pitch black, with just a few flickers of red coals giving off that slow, smoky heat. You open your eyes and realize you've been sleeping next to three other people, two goats, and what might be someone's great aunt snoring softly into a sheepskin. The bed, not really a bed, just a pile of straw, animal pelts, and maybe a soft rock or two. Congratulations, you've discovered medieval lumbar support. You sit up, coughing a little, and your eyes sting. The roof's black with soot, and there's no chimney, because chimneys haven't caught on here. Instead, the smoke from the fire pit just kind of floats around until it slowly leaks out through the thatch. It's cozy, they say. Character building, they say. You think your lungs might be slowly turning into cured meat. Outside, there's no sunshine pouring in. It's a foggy, gray light that leaks through cracks in the door. Someone mumbles something in Old Norse, a language you absolutely don't speak, but based on the tone it sounds like, "Get up or I'm dumping the chamber pot near your boots again." Fair enough. You stretch, but there's no time to actually enjoy that stretch. A girl about 8 years old tosses you your clothes, which include wool trousers, a linen tunic that smells slightly of onions, and shoes made of something that looks like raw hide and feels like wet cardboard. You start putting them on, but the air is so cold your fingers don't want to work. You think briefly about calling in sick, then realize that's not a thing here. No one's invented sick days yet. If your legs work, you're expected to use them. Someone opens the creaky door, and a blast of frigid morning air hits your face like an angry Norse god. Your breath comes out in visible clouds. It's autumn, which means winter is basically already here. The chickens start clucking, and the sheep start bleating, probably in protest. Honestly, same. Your first step outside nearly ends in disaster. You've forgotten the doorframe is only 4 feet high. You bash your forehead and stumble out, now fully awake in the most unpleasant way possible. Welcome to the Viking village population. Cold, tired, and very much unimpressed with your 21st century softness. Let's take a look around. The longhouses here are made from timber and turf, with low walls and curved roofs that make everything feel like you're walking through a Hobbit movie. If the Hobbits had serious mildew issues. The ground is packed mud, sometimes covered in hay, but mostly just wet. Everything is damp. You are damp, and that's just life. You hear someone shouting down by the river, probably fetching water, because guess what? No plumbing. That stream with the icy current, that's where you're drinking, washing, and probably slipping later today. You also notice that the village smells rich. Layers of smoke, fish, unwashed wool, damp earth, manure, and a faint whiff of mead from last night's gathering. Historians still argue whether the average Viking village was earthily aromatic or just flat out smelly. Spoiler, it's both. By the way, you're not alone in this weird time travel sleepover. You're living in a communal household, possibly with 2 families and a handful of extra laborers. Privacy, that's adorable. If you're lucky, you might get a curtained off corner for changing. If you're unlucky, Your changing area is the one spot that always leaks when it rains. As your eyes adjust, you see people already up and working, chopping wood, feeding animals, repairing a fishing net with fingers that move like it's not 35 degrees out. One woman is scraping dried fish scales off a plank like it's a normal Tuesday activity. A child walks by with a wooden spoon and no shoes. You consider asking questions, but then again, you're the one who can't even figure out how to tie your rawhide sandals properly. Fun fact, Viking settlements weren't all wild battle axe chaos. Most days were like this, slow, repetitive, and brutally practical. Everyone had a role, and lazy outsider with soft hands wasn't one of them. You're about to learn that the hard way. Back inside the house, someone's ladling out a warm-ish liquid from a pot suspended over the fire. You lean in. It's not coffee. It's not even tea. It's water with a hint of boiled grain and despair. That's breakfast, but you'll deal with that soon enough. For now, you're awake, standing in the middle of a Viking village and already wondering when the next ship back to modern life sets sail. The sun still hasn't truly risen, but that doesn't matter. In your new Viking life, time isn't measured in clock ticks. It's measured in chores, and right now, yours are piling up like firewood in winter. The foster family you've been dropped into, let's call them the Bjarnasons, aren't exactly impressed with your puzzled stares and visible lack of calluses. The father, a hulking man with a braided beard and a perpetual frown, thrusts a rough wooden bucket into your arms. It's sticky. You don't ask why. The command is clear. It's time to milk the cow. And she's not going to wait for your "I watched a YouTube tutorial" confidence. You trudge through the slush toward the animal enclosure, your rawhide shoes already soaked. Your breath fogs out in steady puffs as you reach a rickety pen that looks like it's been repaired more times than you've logged into Netflix. The cow, a squat, weather-worn beast named Freya, eyes you with the kind of expression usually reserved for unwanted in-laws. Milking a cow, as it turns out, is not an intuitive task. You squat awkwardly, try to position the bucket, and give a hopeful squeeze. Freya responds with a tail slap directly to your face, followed by a low, judgmental moo. You try again, this time managing a pitiful dribble and a handful of straw in the bucket. Success? Meanwhile, another villager, probably 12 years old and already more competent than you, walks past carrying 2 full buckets of milk and balancing a loaf of bread on her head. You don't make eye contact. She doesn't acknowledge your existence. That's the Viking way. Historians often romanticize Viking chores with words like communal, purposeful, or intimately connected to the land. That may be true, but right now you feel intimately connected to a cow that's actively plotting your downfall. After your semi-successful milking attempt, you're sent to refill the firewood stack. Now, firewood here isn't just for comfort, it's survival, and it burns fast when you're relying on it to heat a long house full of people and semi-dry goats. So, off you go, dragging a rough sled-like contraption toward the tree line. Cutting wood with a Viking axe is less Paul Bunyan glory and more "why does everything hurt?" The axe is heavy, slightly uneven, and so well used that its handle is as smooth as your once dignified hands. You raise it, swing down, and the log doesn't so much split as mock you. A few swings later, you've managed to chip a little bark and a whole lot of your ego. By the time you return, cheeks flushed and arms trembling, you're barely able to carry your sad little bundle. The Bjarnasons don't say much. They just take the wood, and nod with a solemnity that suggests you've earned a C- in not freezing to death. Back in the village square, or rather the muddy center where most things happen, you notice people beginning to go about their day. Someone's already begun working a small forge, the clang of iron echoing through the air. Others tend to chickens, who clearly see you as beneath them. The roosters give you a once-over and return to pecking with disdain. Remember how you thought you might get a break after those first few tasks? You sweet summer child, next comes water fetching, because everything requires water, and the only source is the river that might as well be part glacier. The path to the river is slick, worn, and predictably treacherous. You manage to stay upright, barely, but the 2 wooden buckets you're carrying bounce and slosh like they're testing your spirit. Reaching the riverbank, you kneel to fill them, only to realize there's a thin sheen of ice already forming on the surface. You break through it with a stick. It breaks your soul a little in return. By now, your fingers are so numb you could probably high-five a fire pit without noticing. You drag the buckets back, one slipping from your grip and soaking your leg. The Bjarnasons, again, do not comment. Passive disappointment is apparently the national sport. It's worth noting, Viking children did most of these chores regularly by the age of 6 or 7. They'd wake up, tend livestock, gather eggs, and still find time to whittle a tiny god out of driftwood. You, meanwhile, are wondering if you'll survive past lunch. One quirky detail most history books leave out: Viking villages often kept animals inside the house during winter, not just for warmth, but because they were easier to manage. That means the smell you're constantly surrounded by isn't just outside, it's woven into your very being. There's no clean clothes pile, there's just a less filthy rotation. Historians still argue whether this system was born of necessity or tradition, but either way, it's not changing for your delicate modern sensibilities. As the morning stretches on, your tasks begin to blur into a relentless loop. Someone hands you a broom made of twigs and gestures toward the ash pit. You try to sweep. The ashes plume into your face. Another person sends you. The sun still hasn't truly risen, but that doesn't matter. In your new Viking life, time isn't measured in clock ticks. It's measured in chores, and right now, yours are piling up like firewood in winter. The foster family you've been dropped into, let's call them the Bjarnasons, aren't exactly impressed with your puzzled stares and visible lack of calluses. The father, a hulking man with a braided beard and a perpetual frown, thrusts a rough wooden bucket into your arms. It's sticky. You don't ask why. The command is clear. It's time to milk the cow. And she's not going to wait for your "I watched a YouTube tutorial" confidence. You trudge through the slush toward the animal enclosure, your rawhide shoes already soaked. Your breath fogs out in steady puffs as you reach a rickety pen that looks like it's been repaired more times than you've logged into Netflix. The cow, a squat, weather-worn beast named Freya, eyes you with the kind of expression usually reserved for unwanted in-laws. Milking a cow, as it turns out, is not an intuitive task. You squat awkwardly, try to position the bucket, and give a hopeful squeeze. Freya responds with a tail slap directly to your face, followed by a low, judgmental moo. You try again, this time managing a pitiful dribble and a handful of straw in the bucket. Success? Meanwhile, another villager, probably 12 years old and already more competent than you, walks past carrying 2 full buckets of milk and balancing a loaf of bread on her head. You don't make eye contact. She doesn't acknowledge your existence. That's the Viking way. Historians often romanticize Viking chores with words like communal, purposeful, or intimately connected to the land. That may be true, but right now you feel intimately connected to a cow that's actively plotting your downfall. After your semi-successful milking attempt, you're sent to refill the firewood stack. Now, firewood here isn't just for comfort, it's survival, and it burns fast when you're relying on it to heat a long house full of people and semi-dry goats. So, off you go, dragging a rough sled-like contraption toward the tree line. Cutting wood with a Viking axe is less Paul Bunyan glory and more why does everything hurt. The axe is heavy, slightly uneven, and so well used that its handle is as smooth as your once dignified hands. You raise it, swing down, and the log doesn't so much split as mock you. A few swings later, you've managed to chip a little bark and a whole lot of your ego. By the time you return, cheeks flushed and arms trembling, you're barely able to carry your sad little bundle. The Bjarnasons don't say much. They just take the wood and nod with a solemnity that suggests you've earned a C- in not freezing to death. Back in the village square, or rather the muddy center where most things happen, you notice people beginning to go about their day. Someone's already begun working a small forge, the clang of iron echoing through the air. Others tend to chickens, who clearly see you as beneath them. The roosters give you a once-over and return to pecking with disdain. Remember how you thought you might get a break after those first few tasks? You sweet summer child. Next comes water fetching, because everything requires water, and the only source is the river that might as well be part glacier. The path to the river is slick, worn, and predictably treacherous. You manage to stay upright, barely, but the 2 wooden buckets you're carrying bounce and slosh like they're testing your spirit. Reaching the riverbank, you kneel to fill them, only to realize there's a thin sheen of ice already forming on the surface. You break through it with a stick. It breaks your soul a little in return. By now, your fingers are so numb you could probably high-five a fire pit without noticing. You drag the buckets back, one slipping from your grip and soaking your leg. The Bjarnasons, again, do not comment. Passive disappointment is apparently the national sport. It's worth noting, Viking children did most of these chores regularly by the age of 6 or 7. They'd wake up, tend livestock, gather eggs, and still find time to whittle a tiny god out of driftwood. You, meanwhile, are wondering if you'll survive past lunch. One quirky detail most history books leave out: Viking villages often kept animals inside the house during winter, not just for warmth, but because they were easier to manage. That means the smell you're constantly surrounded by isn't just outside, it's woven into your very being. There's no clean clothes pile, there's just a less filthy rotation. Historians still argue whether this system was born of necessity or tradition, but either way, it's not changing for your delicate modern sensibilities. As the morning stretches on, your tasks begin to blur into a relentless loop. Someone hands you a broom made of twigs and gestures toward the ash pit. You try to sweep. The ashes plume into your face. Another person sends you Section 4, breakfast time. Finally, something familiar, except not. You've survived the smokehouse slumber, conquered your linen and leather layering minigame, and milked a cow with only minor emotional damage. Now your stomach, which has been politely rumbling for the past hour, begins to demand answers. You follow the villagers back into the longhouse, where breakfast is being prepared in a large iron pot suspended over the central hearth. There's an air of excitement. You brace yourself for something hearty, filling, maybe eggs, a slab of bacon, a thick hunk of fresh bread steaming from the oven. Nope, it's porridge, again. Specifically, barley gruel, yesterday's with some extras stirred in. A wooden bowl is handed to you. Inside is a lumpy grayish mixture, suspiciously sticky, with flecks of herbs and something that might be a berry. You stir it with your spoon, which is also wooden and not entirely clean. The smell isn't bad, exactly. It's earthy, familiar in a way you can't place. You take a bite. It's cold in the middle. The villagers eat without comment, shoveling in their spoonfuls efficiently. You chew slowly. The porridge clings to your teeth like it has opinions. A child across the fire is sprinkling dried fish flakes into theirs, adding what might generously be called flavor. Another woman uses a chunk of hard rye bread as an edible spoon. Historians believe Viking breakfasts were pragmatic affairs. No frills, carb-heavy, and designed to fuel long, brutal days. Grains like barley or rye were boiled, reheated, and reused. If you were lucky, you got a bit of honey. If you were really lucky, there were leftovers from the night before. Boiled turnips, fish, or preserved meat. Today is not one of those lucky days. A man beside you offers a small chunk of cheese. You smile gratefully until you bite into it and discover it tastes faintly of goat and sorrow. It's been aged in a linen wrap and maybe someone's armpit. You nod politely and chase it down with a sip of sour whey. That's another thing. No coffee, no tea, no hot chocolate. Just thin beer, soured milk, or mead if it's a feast day. Today, you're given a mug of something pale and vaguely yeasty. It's technically safe to drink. Boiling and fermentation kill bacteria, but it tastes like disappointment. You try not to grimace. The others, meanwhile, are practically glowing. They enjoy this meal because it's warm, it's sustaining, and it doesn't require chasing or fishing. To them, this is luxury. To you, it's a Scandinavian endurance challenge. Now, let's talk about the seating arrangement. There are no chairs. Benches line the walls, and you squat or perch on a stool that looks like it lost a fight with a boar. There's no dining table either. Just people balancing bowls in laps, elbows dangerously close to the fire pit. As you shift to avoid burning your foot, a woman elbows her husband and mutters something. He chuckles and throws you a glance that says, "You'll never make it." And you know what? He might be right. One quirky tradition, Vikings often flavored their gruel with bits of tree bark, birch bark, to be exact, dried, powdered, and tossed in for a bitter tonic-like flavor. It's also rumored to help digestion. Whether it helps this particular porridge go down easier is unclear, but you do feel oddly more awake after bite 3. Of course, as you eat, there's constant noise. Coughing, babies fussing, the fire crackling, spoons clinking. There's no quiet contemplation here. Breakfast is business. Eat, fuel up, move on. You're still halfway through your bowl when someone starts passing around wool threads and bone needles, ready to start their day's weaving. And there's no such thing as your own bowl here. You're expected to clean yours after eating, or just wipe it out with your sleeve and reuse it later. The woman next to you finishes her meal, licks her spoon clean, and tucks it into her belt. You try the same, but your sleeve smears more than it absorbs, and now your tunic has a decorative porridge stain. Historians still argue whether Viking meals were communal bonding rituals or just another extension of labor, but in this moment, it's clear every bite is survival, every sip is fuel, and you're already dreaming of a croissant you'll never see again. You try to offer your thanks, gesturing vaguely and smiling. The Bjarnasons acknowledge you with subtle nods. You've eaten, you're dressed, you've worked badly. That's enough for now, but don't get too cozy. Someone just handed you a broom and pointed toward the goats again. Section 5. It's mid-morning now, which in Viking time means keep moving or you'll freeze. Your stomach's full, well, lined, let's say, and you've already put in more physical effort than an average Tuesday in modern life. So naturally, your body decides this would be a great moment to use the restroom. Here's the problem. There is no restroom. No indoor plumbing, no cozy outhouse with a toilet seat warmer and scented candles, no designated private time at all. In a Viking village, answering nature's call is more about strategic planning and praying to the gods for good weather. You step outside the longhouse and instantly feel that sharp bite of wind on your face and a few other areas your cloak doesn't cover very well. Someone points vaguely toward the edge of the village. Behind the fence, they say with a shrug. Ah, yes, the fence. A rickety line of wooden stakes half submerged in mud, just beyond which lies your new least favorite place on earth, the latrine pit. Let's talk about Viking sanitation. Historians generally agree that while Vikings were cleaner than many of their medieval peers, they even had grooming tools like tweezers and ear scoops. Their toilet facilities were basic at best. Some settlements had a trench dug a little ways from the main houses, just far enough to be out of the way, but not far enough to spare your nose. You trudge through the slush, trying not to slip on frozen manure or the ever-present mud and straw cocktail that seems to cling to your shoes like a Viking curse. When you finally reach the latrine area, you find what looks like a wooden plank with a hole in it, balanced over a pit. There's also a wooden bucket of ash and some straw nearby. Ancient Viking toilet paper, if you're feeling brave. You crouch. You regret many life choices. The wind whips around you, tugging at your cloak, your dignity, and any remaining sense of comfort. There's a raven perched nearby, watching, and you swear it's judging you. You name him Eric the Inappropriate. There's no privacy screen, no door, and certainly no lock. Anyone passing by can and probably will strike up a conversation. You're mid-squat when a barefoot child strolls past with a chicken under one arm, waves casually, and keeps going. You return the wave. What else can you do? Once the task is complete, you toss some ashes down the pit like you were shown, not entirely convinced it does anything. The straw you use for wiping is rougher than expected, like exfoliating your soul. You shuffle away, humble and slightly chafed. This whole experience makes you appreciate things you've never even thought about before, like heated seats and doors and indoor plumbing. But there's a strange honesty to it too. It's messy, but it's real. And it connects you, albeit uncomfortably, to the everyday struggles of Viking life. You head back toward the main cluster of buildings, passing a small group of villagers gathering compost for the farm plots. Someone offers you a pitchfork. You try to politely decline, but it's not a question. So now Your next job is helping stir a pile of what appears to be rotting seaweed, animal waste, and last week's vegetable scraps. Welcome to early Viking agriculture. Many coastal Viking settlements use seaweed as a fertilizer, mixing it with manure and ash to enrich the soil. The smell is unique, not quite fish, not quite barnyard. More like a swamp that's just realized it's sentient and angry. You try your best, but your hands, still raw from morning chores, aren't doing great with the rough wooden handle. You drop the pitchfork twice. A nearby farmer watches you with the silent endurance of a man who's accepted that you are not a helpful addition to this society. Historians still debate how organized Viking sanitation practices really were, whether each household managed its own waste or there were communal efforts. Either way, it's clear you're on the lowest rung of that particular hierarchy. After an hour or so of compost duty, someone signals for a quick rinse in the stream. You head down with a few others, hoping to wash the worst of the morning off your hands. The water is, unsurprisingly, freezing, like dunking your fingers into a snowstorm. But the villagers seem unaffected, scrubbing away with handfuls of moss and sand like it's a spa day. You do your best to follow suit. The result is cleaner hands, frost-nipped knuckles, and a new appreciation for modern soap. A final humiliation awaits. Your shoes are now soaked again. You consider removing them to dry by the fire, but remember that doing so earlier earned you 3 splinters and a very stern talking to from an elder who pointed at your socks and said something that probably translated to soft like goat's belly. You shuffle back to the longhouse, trying to ignore the cold now seeping into your bones. Eric the inappropriate flies overhead again. You swear he cackles. As you sit down on a creaky bench to rest for a moment, your stomach grumbles. Not from hunger, but from the porridge. You try not to think about it, or the latrine pit, or the straw, and just when you're beginning to drift into a moment of reflection, someone hands you a bucket. It smells ominous. Pigpen, they say. You nod solemnly. This is your life now. Section 6. Pig duty. You'd laugh if it weren't so tragic. The bucket in your hands is sloshing with what looks like porridge's evil twin, thicker, lumpier, and far more aromatic. You're told it's pig feed. You're not entirely sure it's not a low-level biological weapon. You trudge across the village toward the sty, a patchy enclosure surrounded by splintered fencing and clouds of steam rising ominously into the frigid morning air. The pigs are already awake, snorting and shoving each other around in the mud like they own the place. Which, honestly, they kind of do. One of them makes eye contact with you, and there's a moment of mutual understanding. Neither of you wants to be here. The gate squeals like it's auditioning for a horror story. You step inside, boots immediately sinking into several unidentifiable layers of slush, hay, and pig mystery. You slip. Not all the way, but enough to remind you that these pigs are not here for your amusement. They are strong, heavy, and not particularly patient when breakfast is involved. You tip the bucket into the trough, doing your best not to gag as the mixture of sour milk, turnip peels, and what might be fermented fish heads sloshes into place. The pigs charge like fluffy, muddy linebackers, pushing past your legs with zero regard for personal space or structural integrity. Historians often gloss over the daily farm labor of Viking villages in favor of raids and feasts. But for most people, this was the reality. tending to animals, feeding them, cleaning their pens, and occasionally dodging being trampled. You reach for a wooden rake to begin cleaning the pen. Although that term feels generous for what you're doing, it's more of a rearrangement of filth than any meaningful sanitation. You drag straw over a particularly offensive pile of something and pretend that's what everyone else does too. Meanwhile, a pig, possibly the boss pig, decides your cloak looks chewable. You try to step away. The pig follows. You attempt to shoo it. It grunts, unimpressed. Eventually, it loses interest and waddles off, leaving a trail of frothy footprints behind it and a new rip in your sleeve. At this point, your nostrils have entered a stage of sensory surrender. You don't smell the pigsty anymore because your body has wisely decided that survival means turning off your sense of smell altogether. You glance toward the village square where others are also working, mending nets, spinning wool, patching a roof. Everyone is busy, cold, and seemingly unfazed by any of it. You, on the other hand, are now fully embedded in what scholars might call the humbling process. Eventually, a boy appears and relieves you of pig duty with a nod that suggests, "Don't worry, this part gets no better." You hand him the rake like it's a sacred burden, and he walks off with the casual ease of someone who's probably wrestled pigs since birth. Now comes your next chore, hauling water to the forge, because apparently the blacksmith's apprentice injured his hand sharpening a sickle, and you, soft-palmed, questionably balanced, porridge-stained outsider that you are the next best option. You're handed 2 large wooden buckets and directed down the now familiar path to the river. The buckets are heavy even when empty, and your arms are already protesting from all the other things they've carried today. You trudge through the snow-melted mud, your shoes now doing that soft, cold squelch that makes your soul sigh. At the riverbank, you kneel again. The ice along the edges has thickened since this morning. You break through it with a stick, then carefully fill the buckets, trying not to fall in. You don't succeed at staying dry. One sleeve is now soaked up to the elbow. Classic. Carrying the full buckets is a test of physics and willpower. They swing, they slosh. You tilt your body like a sad, wet scarecrow trying to defy gravity. Halfway back, one of them spills down your leg. You pause, breathing hard, wondering how anyone in this village manages to get anything done without collapsing from sheer discomfort. Historians still argue whether Viking villages were organized primarily by necessity or by tradition. But one thing is clear, there was no such thing as idle hands. Even the elderly contribute by weaving nets or tending to children. There's no downtime. You work until there's nothing left to fix, feed, or clean, and even then someone hands you another bucket. You arrive at the forge, water sloshing at your feet. The blacksmith, a woman with biceps that look carved from stone, nods her thanks. She's working on a small blade, hammering it with rhythmic precision that you find oddly soothing. Sparks fly, the heat radiates from the fire, and for just a moment you forget your wet socks and pig-scented limbs. The forge is the warmest place in the village. You linger, too long. She notices. She arches one eyebrow, hands you a bellows, and gestures toward the fire. You spend the next half hour pumping air into the flames, your arms trembling, your shoulders aching. But it's kind of satisfying. The fire flares with each push, the metal glows, and you start to understand why blacksmithing is equal parts craft and art. Eventually, you're relieved of your post. You stretch your aching limbs and head back to the longhouse, where someone's tossing dried herbs into the hearth. It smells like juniper, smoke, and slightly less pig. You sit on your familiar bench, momentarily warmed and completely exhausted. You think about modern gyms, how people pay money to carry heavy things and sweat in artificially lit rooms. Meanwhile, here in the Viking village, life is the workout. No memberships required, just a strong back and, ideally, calluses thicker than your skull. You're getting there. Section 7, it's noon, or something like it. There are no clocks, no bells, no digital nudges on your wrist. Time in the Viking village flows by the sun, the smell of stew, and how loudly the chickens are yelling. You're starting to get used to this unstructured rhythm, although your spine and kneecaps disagree. The midday chores have paused for just a moment, and someone hands you a bundle of items: a wooden comb, a bowl of gritty soap-like ash paste, and a piece of cloth that looks like it's been scrubbed on a rock for several years. Bathing, they say with a grin. It's not an invitation, it's an intervention. You're herded toward the stream again, but not the icy part. This time, it's a shallow bend in the water, shielded slightly by brush, and someone's boiled a bucket of water over the fire to warm it a little. It's as close to spa luxury as you'll get here. You take off your outer layers with the enthusiasm of a man peeling off wet cardboard, and the wind hits you like a divine punishment. Goosebumps erupt instantly. You dip the cloth into the warm water and start scrubbing your arms, then your face, then your already abused feet. And yes, the soap really is ash paste, wood ash mixed with animal fat, rubbed in with coarse cloth or moss. It smells like scorched bacon and feels like exfoliating with volcanic gravel. You're told it prevents lice. You hope they're right, because this stuff is now in your ears. The wooden comb? Every Viking had one. They were serious about hair. You're instructed to run it through your hair and beard, if you had one, and remove visitors. That's right, delousing is a regular part of the grooming ritual. It's not considered disgusting, it's just life. You try the comb, it snags, it protests. Your scalp protests louder. A few strands come out, possibly some of your ego too. Nearby, a few women are brushing each other's hair, carefully plaiting it with fingers that move faster than yours ever will. One girl uses a bone needle to etch delicate patterns into a braid. The woman beside her spits into a palm and slicks down flyaways. You try to mimic this and end up with hair that now smells faintly of fish and regret. Bathing day, by the way, is usually Saturday, but depending on the season, access to clean water, and your social status, it might be more once a week, or when you really, really need it. You fell squarely into the second category. Historians love to note that Vikings were actually cleaner than many of their medieval European neighbors. Arabic chroniclers even wrote about how frequently Norsemen bathed. They had grooming kits with tweezers, razors, and ear spoons. You've now used 2 of those items. That's more than you wanted. After your makeshift scrubbing, you dry off with your cloak, which feels wrong, but no one hands you a towel. You dress in the same stiff, damp clothing, grateful that your socks are only mostly wet now. You shuffle back into the longhouse, cleaner but still chilly, and collapse onto the bench just in time for something unsettling. A man sits next to you and begins cleaning his ears with a carved stick. It's curved at one end, sort of like a miniature spoon. He offers you one with a polite grunt. You take it, if only out of peer pressure, and tentatively begin mining for gold. It's surprisingly effective and oddly satisfying until you sneeze and nearly drop it in the fire. Next comes beard oil, not fancy, not store-bought, just a blend of animal fat and herbs that someone slathers into your now semi-damp hair. Smell like pine, they say. You do, and maybe a hint of bear. Viking hygiene might not win any modern awards, but it's methodical. There's intention behind each step, even if it feels like a muddy assault course for your senses. A little-known detail, lice combs were often shared in close households. Yes, shared, as in, you used it, now I'll use it. It's intimate in a way you'd rather not think about too deeply. You look around and notice something strange. People are smiling more, laughing even. There's a kind of social energy around grooming, gossip, quiet jokes, and that kind of mutual camaraderie that happens when everyone's been elbow deep in fish oil together. And here's the wildest part. You're starting to feel a little better. Cleaner, maybe even sharper. Sure, you still look like a damn sheep in oversized linen, but you no longer feel like the village embarrassment, just a mildly soggy honorary Viking. Historians still argue about the exact schedule and frequency of Norse bathing routines. Some sources suggest weekly, others say less during winter months, unless you lived near hot springs. Lucky Icelanders. But one thing they agree on is that grooming mattered. A lot. You're told, as you sit drying by the fire, that being neat and tidy was associated with strength, dignity, and respect. Dirty warriors were not taken seriously, and smelly farmers didn't find many marriage prospects. You briefly reconsider your earlier choices involving goat duty. By the time the light begins to shift toward late afternoon, you've earned something of a nod from the Bjarnason clan. You're clean enough not to offend anyone, and that's a win. You scratch your ear absently with the comb and realize you've joined the hygiene club. Congratulations. Please accept this complimentary smell of juniper and onions. Section 8. If you were hoping the women in the Viking village had it easier, less mud, fewer pig-related altercations, maybe more sitting and embroidery under soft candlelight, well, welcome to another slice of hard truth served with a wooden spoon. You're handed off again, this time to assist with what's referred to, with a straight face, as lighter duties. That phrase, as it turns out, is a Viking euphemism for doing 5 things at once, while carrying a toddler on your hip and balancing a steaming pot with your elbow. You follow Freydis, the matriarch of the household. She's in her 50s, maybe older, though it's hard to tell. Her hands are a road map of calluses, burns, and needle pricks. She wears a tunic layered over a thick apron, her long braids tied back with leather strips. When she moves, people get out of the way. You do too. First up, spinning. Freydis hands you a drop spindle and a wad of carded wool. She demonstrates twist, flick, let the spindle dance. You try, yours wobbles, drops, and tangles before you even blink. She picks it up, sighs, and gestures for you to try again. Spinning wool isn't flashy, but it's absolutely essential. Every thread used in Viking clothing, from undergarments to battle cloaks, started in someone's palm. Women spun during every free moment, while walking, while talking, probably while scolding children. It was the slow heartbeat of domestic life. As you fumble with the wool, Fridas expertly spins hers into even, tight thread, winding it around the spindle like magic. Beside her, a younger woman, possibly her daughter, starts weaving on a vertical loom. The soft thunk of the shuttle becomes its own background rhythm. Historians often gloss over this domestic sphere, but without it, Viking life would unravel, literally. Clothes, sails, nets, blankets, even ropes, all depended on this constant, quiet labor. You're not quite getting the hang of spinning. Your thread looks like a twisted nightmare caterpillar. Fridas raises an eyebrow, but says nothing. You switch to helping with the weaving, where you're instructed to pass the shuttle and beat the threads into place with a wooden sword. It feels satisfying until you smack your knuckles. Next comes something more intense, food prep. Not just tossing things in a pot, but the entire process. First, you help grind barley with a quern stone. It's 2 heavy discs of stone that you rotate manually. Your arms begin to burn after 5 minutes, while Fridas just keeps grinding with the strength of someone fueled by necessity and muscle memory. You shift to chopping dried herbs with a bone-handled knife. The mix includes nettle, angelica, and something that smells vaguely minty. These will go into stew, tea, and possibly a medicinal poultice if you keep bruising your fingers. At one point, Fridas's daughter brings over a swaddled baby and immediately returns to slicing onions without a word. You are now holding a Viking baby. He stares at you. You stare back. He sneezes directly into your face. Congratulations, you've earned a promotion to assistant caregiver. Children here are part of the workflow from birth. Older ones gather firewood, herd animals, fetch water. The little ones are constantly supervised, but also constantly passed from person to person like bread dough. You rock the baby awkwardly, marveling at how calm he seems despite the clamor around him. Later, you're invited to help sew up a tear in a tunic. You thread the bone needle and begin stitching, only to stab yourself within 30 seconds. Blood wells up. Fridas grunts, takes the fabric, and sews the seam in about 3 precise motions. She hands it back. You nod solemnly, message received. You try to escape to something easier and end up at the dye vat. The dyeing process is simple but wild. A pot of boiling water, a bundle of lichen, and a smell that's equal parts moss, vinegar, and socks. You're instructed to stir it with a stick while someone dips a skein of yarn. The color that comes out is a gentle golden green, muted, natural, and oddly beautiful. Fun fact: Viking women often used urine to set dyes. You try not to ask if that's happening today. Historians still argue how much domestic work Viking women balanced with social or political power. Some had immense influence, especially in managing the household, organizing trade, and arranging marriages. But even the highest-ranking woman probably spent part of her day chasing a goose out of the vegetable patch. And that goose is chasing you now. Yes, while retrieving firewood, you wander too close to its nest. It flaps, it honks, it launches a full aerial assault on your knee. You flee. Fridas, of course, just throws a pebble at it and mutters what must be the Viking equivalent of "not today, Ingrid." Back in the longhouse, as the afternoon light begins to tilt, golden through the gaps in the roof, the women begin prepping for the evening meal. The stew simmers. Bread is set near the fire to warm. The baby you were holding is now asleep under a fur blanket, and you, dear traveler, are quietly unraveling, not from stress, from awe. Everything here is purposeful, coordinated, exhausting, and it's all held together by women who do it with silent grace and the occasional very pointed glance when someone messes up the spindle again. Yes, it's still you. You sit near the fire with your aching fingers and red knuckles. You smell like wool, onions, and a bit of goat. You're covered in flour and moss, and yet this part of the Viking day has a strange, rhythmic piece to it, at least until Fridas hands you a stack of diapers and says something that sounds suspiciously like latrine round 2. Section 9, you were just starting to believe things might slow down just a bit. The stew's aroma was filling the longhouse, the fire crackled comfortingly, and your hands were finally starting to warm up. But now, you're swept into the most dangerous event of the day. Viking social hour? No, not a feast, not yet. This is something far more perilous. Gossip. The sun is hanging lower now, throwing orange light across the muddy village as people gather near the center, a place that looks deceptively like a break area. You're ushered into a loose semicircle of benches, stumps, and upturned barrels, and handed a cup of weak ale that tastes like flat bread water. You sip it. You regret it. But this isn't about the drinks. This is about passive aggression delivered with a smile and a dramatic saga tone. The first voice rises. A woman in a saffron-dyed cloak is complaining that someone's goats have been trampling her vegetable plot. She doesn't name names, but her eyes fall pointedly on a man 2 seats down. He shifts, shrugs, and offers a deflective joke about how goats follow Odin's will. A few chuckles ripple through the group. You, trying to fit in, let out a laugh that might be a bit too loud. Everyone turns. You shrink back into your slightly stained tunic and stare at your shoes. Strike 1. Gossip in Viking society isn't just casual chatter. It's diplomacy. It's court. It's reputation management at a time when there's no HR department, just memory and grudges. One woman leans over and informs you that another family in the village tried to claim her mother's spinning wheel after the funeral. Scandalous. You nod like you understand the full political weight of loom inheritance. Then it's your turn. Someone asks you what land your family owns. You stammer. Land? You panic and say a fjord. The group nods politely, but you know what they're thinking. No one owns a fjord. That's like saying, I live on a mountain. Strike 2. A man then recounts a fish trading dispute from last week that, in his retelling, sounds like a full-blown naval battle. He reenacts it too, complete with boat paddling gestures and a dramatic voice for his cousin Sven, who swore by Freya's beard that the eel was short-weighted. You sip your ale, trying to follow, but someone leans in and whispers, it wasn't eel, it was herring. A collective chuckle passes through the group as if you've just been let in on state secrets. These aren't just idle stories, they're a form of social scorekeeping. Who helped with harvest? Who didn't bring firewood? Who insulted whose uncle by not showing up to the goat's sacrifice? Everyone is listening. Everyone is filing away details, including you, poor, tired, dirty outsider, trying not to offend anyone by asking if there's a bathroom again. One quirky tradition you observe? The saga voice. When telling stories, some villagers drop their pitch and elongate words, like they're reciting a poem. It gives everything a mythic edge, even if they're just talking about someone stealing cheese curds. Historians still argue how much of Viking oral tradition was myth-making versus community bonding. But sitting here, surrounded by wool-clad judges and the occasional chicken walking through the scene like it owns the place, it's obvious that this is where real power lives, in memory, speech, and a well-placed sigh. Then a teenage boy joins the circle, wide-eyed and breathless. "The men are back," he says. Everyone perks up. The tension shifts from passive commentary to active curiosity. A handful of men, muddy, tired, carrying bundles of firewood and what looks like fish, enter the square. Their return is routine, but each time they arrive, it's a mini-event. One of them tosses a fish your way. You fumble it. It slaps into your chest and hits the ground. There's a beat of silence, then laughter. Not cruel exactly, just deeply amused. You pick up the fish and mutter a soft apology to no one in particular. The saga teller from earlier raises a mug and declares, "Henceforth he shall be called Bjorn Fishcatcher without a net." More laughter. "You've earned a nickname. It could have been worse." As the gathering continues, you notice subtle patterns. Who speaks first? Who interrupts? Who keeps quiet until everyone's looking? There's hierarchy here, unspoken but respected, not just based on strength or wealth, but storytelling, wit, memory, and the ability to deliver a killer line about goat behavior. You're still a newcomer, but by listening, nodding at the right times, and not dropping another fish, you begin to stitch yourself, clumsily, into the fabric of this verbal sparring match. Eventually, as the sun dips below the trees, someone brings out a small drum and begins to tap a slow rhythm. No lyrics, no dancing, just a heartbeat, steady and soft, underscoring the stories that shift from gossip to old sagas. People lean back. The pace slows. The warmth of the fire, the ale, and the shared breath starts to settle into the seams of the gathering. You breathe a little easier. Maybe, just maybe, they'll stop asking about your fjord. Section 10. So far, you've milked a cow, offended a pig, survived a near-lethal spinning incident, and earned a nickname involving a fish. That's a solid resume for your first day in a Viking village. But now, as dusk settles and the air grows colder, you're invited, maybe summoned, to an event that carries more mystery and much higher stakes. You're going to a ritual. You don't know what kind of ritual. No one explains. They just say, "Come," and hand you a bundle of sage, a carved wooden bowl, and a look that says, "Don't mess this up." The villagers begin walking toward a small clearing outside the longhouse cluster, torches lighting the narrow path through pine trees and frozen grass. The smell of smoke, herbs, and anticipation hangs heavy in the air. You fall into step, trying not to look as nervous as you feel. Ahead, a low stone altar stands beneath a crooked birch tree. Animal bones dangle from the branches, clinking in the breeze like wind chimes designed by someone with a taste for drama. Around the altar, people are forming a ring, their faces solemn, their bodies wrapped in heavy cloaks. This is no village gossip circle. This is serious. A woman steps forward, tall braided hair, dark eyes, and begins chanting. Her voice is low, rhythmic, and not entirely melodic, more like the sound of a wheel grinding slowly through dirt. She's a vulva, a seeress, respected and feared. You were told not to look her directly in the eyes. You do anyway. She doesn't blink. Historians know surprisingly little about these rituals. Some say they were about harvests. Others think they were protection spells before raids. And then there's the suggestion of sacrifice. But let's not jump to conclusions. Tonight's ritual involves fire, that much is clear. A brazier is lit, and smoke rises in curling fingers, thick with juniper and some other herb that makes your eyes water. The wooden bowl you were handed earlier is taken from you, filled with a dark liquid, maybe blood, maybe fermented berries, and passed around. You accept it when it reaches you. You take a sip. It's taut, earthy, and tastes faintly of metal. You nod, pretending you've just enjoyed a fine vintage. Suddenly, a goat is brought forward. Your heart stutters. Is this? But no, at least not tonight. The goat is adorned with flowers and a carved wooden token, and then gently led around the circle. Children follow, humming a melody that sounds older than any language you know. There's reverence here, not fear. Relief washes over you. Still, there's an edge to the night, a kind of tension beneath the calm. Someone begins telling a story of Thor, of giants, of lightning and loss. The voice is deep, hypnotic. You find yourself swaying with the words, not from belief, but from the sheer weight of shared memory. Religion in Viking times wasn't confined to temples. It was fluid, personal, tied to land and story and blood. There was no strict priesthood, no centralized doctrine, just gods who could be bargained with, feared, or ignored, depending on the season. Tonight you're witnessing a kind of performance prayer hybrid. There's symbolism in every movement, every flicker of the fire. A woman scatters flower petals into the flames. Another places a token carved like a horse into a tree hollow. You still don't understand what's happening, but you feel it. The gravity of belief pulling everyone inward. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies were religious or simply cultural expressions. Did the villagers truly believe the gods were watching, or was it about reinforcing social bonds, passing down stories, giving shape to fear? You don't know. But when the fire roars louder as someone chants the name of Odin, you decide it's not the best time to be skeptical. Then comes the silence, deep, total, absolute. For a full minute, no one moves. You don't either. The vulva steps forward, smoke curling around her like a shawl, and begins to hum. It's a single rising tone that vibrates in your chest. Others join in. The sound builds, not louder, just wider. A living hum. The goat bleats once softly. The fire crackles, and then, just like that, it's over. People begin to move again. Someone pats the goat. Someone else offers you a bit of bread, as if to say, "You made it." You nod, still unsure whether this was a religious rite, a community bonding event, or both. As the villagers file back toward their homes, the vulva walks past you. She doesn't speak, but she drops a small bone into your palm, a token carved with a spiral. You glance down at it. It's warm, even in the cold air. You don't ask what it means, you just pocket it. On the walk back, the group is quieter, not tense, just reflective. The ritual was heavy, even if you didn't understand it. And now, there's the unspoken sense that something has shifted inside the group, or maybe inside you. One child runs ahead, laughing. A man begins humming. A woman points at the stars. There's life again. But the ritual still hangs in the back of your mind, like smoke in your clothes. Back in the longhouse, the fire is waiting. So is your familiar seat. You sit, hands still wrapped around that carved token. You're not sure if you were just blessed, warned, or welcomed, but you are sure of one thing: you'll never look at a goat the same way again. Section 11. You're feeling bold now. Not hero of the saga, bold, but I might survive until breakfast, bold. Until you open your mouth. It starts innocently enough. You're helping restack firewood beside the longhouse, chatting or trying to with a teenage boy named Leaf. You point at the sky, trying to compliment the stars, and mispronounce a word that turns out to mean troll snot. He blinks, then snorts, then laughs. A few others join in. You've committed your first serious linguistic offense. It's easy to forget. Surrounded by the comforts of storytelling and stew, that you're a foreigner here, not just in time, but in tongue. And language in the Viking world isn't just about communication, it's deeply wrapped in respect, reputation, and belief. You can't afford to sound foolish, even though you do, constantly. You try again, this time complimenting the village's shields. Unfortunately, your old Norse comes out as something closer to, your shield is made of cheese. They're polite about it, but your new nickname, Austin's Shoulder Cheese Shield, spreads faster than butter on warm flatbread. You're escorted back inside by a man who's clearly trying not to laugh. He tries to teach you how to pronounce Jotnar, the word for frost giants. You keep saying Jotnar, which apparently sounds like greedy belly button. He corrects you gently, over and over, until you say it right. Then he claps you on the back, like you've just learned to walk. The importance of language here isn't just functional, it's spiritual. Words have weight. Say the wrong thing in the wrong tone, and you might insult a deity, a family line, or a particularly sensitive sheep. Vikings were big believers in flyting, ritualized verbal dueling. Witty insults were admired, sloppy language was not. One quirky fact: some Norse phrases had multiple meanings, depending on the tone or setting. For example, your beard is full of sea frost could be praise, mockery, or a flirtation. You are not equipped to navigate this minefield. You attempt a toast at dinner, mimicking what you've heard, to Thor and thick soup. The villagers stare. Then someone bursts out laughing. Apparently, you've said to Thor and thick sheep. They raise their bowls anyway. That's mercy. After the meal, during the evening lull, you try asking about the stories from the ritual. A kind woman explains a few in slow, careful words: giants who eat the moon, wolves that chase the sun, gods who walk in disguise among mortals. You nod. You understand none of it, but you nod. Then comes your next test, interacting with the animals again. You volunteer, foolishly, to help bring in the sheep for the night. The children cheer. You assume this is encouragement. It's not. It's anticipation. The sheep, you discover, do not respect you. They respect no one. They scatter as soon as they see you coming. You attempt to herd them like you've seen in cartoons. You shout. You wave your arms. You run. They run faster. Eventually, Freydis's youngest daughter strolls out with a bucket of oats and calmly gathers them with a single word: Kom. You repeat it. The sheep ignore you. One sneezes. You return to the longhouse, scratched, muddy, and emotionally defeated by wool. Someone hands you a small leather pouch. Inside, a rune carved from bone. For speech, they say. A joke, probably, but you tuck it into your belt anyway. Historians still argue whether runes were used more for everyday writing or for magical purposes. To you, they now feel like a desperate lifeline to avoid further embarrassment. Later that night, the fire is low, the mood soft. You hear someone whisper singing an old lullaby in a language you'll never quite grasp. But there's a comfort to it, an understanding beyond words. A boy walks by and offers you a piece of dried apple. You thank him, and this time you get the words right. He smiles. No more cheese shields, he says. Progress. You settle into your fur pile as the longhouse darkens. You replay every misspoken word in your mind, cringing a little, chuckling at some. In the flickering shadows, even your mistakes begin to feel like stitches. Badly sewn but holding. You're not fluent, you're not graceful, but you're here. And that, in the Viking village, counts for something. Section 12. Dinner's over, the torches have burned low, and it's officially quiet time. That doesn't mean everyone heads off to a private room and pulls down blackout curtains. Privacy, remember, is a modern luxury. Here the entire village winds down together in a shared longhouse, surrounded by snores, smoke, and someone's feet a bit too close to your face. You settle in near the hearth once more, tucking your cloak around your legs and trying not to disturb the sleeping chicken nestled beside you. Its name, apparently, is Thorstein, and it does not enjoy sudden movements. But before anyone truly sleeps, there's one final tradition to observe. Story time. This isn't your average bedtime tale with a neat moral and a happy ending. No, Viking sagas are epic, messy, often contradictory, and occasionally involve someone getting turned into a tree. They're told not from books, but from memory, passed down through generations like precious heirlooms, only with more wolves and fewer guarantees about accuracy. The eldest man in the room, a wiry fellow with white hair and a voice like gravel in a wooden bowl, clears his throat. The room hushes. Even Thorstein the chicken stops fussing. The tale begins. It's about a man named Grettir who wrestled a draugr, a restless undead creature, from a burial mound. There's blood, vengeance, and some casual defiance of the gods. No one blinks at the undead part. You do, but only once. As he speaks, people murmur their approval at certain parts, laugh at others, and even correct him occasionally. No, no, one woman says, it was his uncle's axe, not his brother's. He grunts, adjusts the tale midstream, and continues as though nothing happened. This oral storytelling tradition is more than entertainment. It's how history is kept, how values are reinforced, and how identity is shaped. If you can tell a good saga, you earn status. If you remember the details, even better. The man finishes with a flourish, something about a cursed ring and a seer who vanished into fog, and the room exhales in unison. Another woman picks up the thread, with a tale of Loki transforming into a horse. You try to follow, but somewhere between shape-shifting and midnight birth, your brain begins to fog over. Then you're nudged. Your turn. You blink, panic. They gesture for you to tell a story, something from your world. You scramble mentally, digging through anything remotely legendary. You land, with sheer desperation, on the tale of the tortoise and the hare. You begin slowly, hesitantly, a fast animal, a slow one, a race. They frown, intrigued. You embellish. The hare is arrogant, the tortoise is wise. There's a lesson, somehow, By the end, your version involves forest spirits and the hare getting cursed by a goddess of speed. The room nods approvingly. Not bad for a beginner. One of the children stares at you wide-eyed. Tell another? You glance around. People are smiling. Someone tosses you a hunk of bread. Thorstein nestles deeper into your cloak. For the first time all day, you feel, dare you say it, welcome, but you're not off the hook yet. Before sleep, the vulva, the seeress from the ritual, enters the longhouse. She doesn't speak. She simply walks slowly, trailing smoke from a small bowl of smoldering herbs, stopping to sprinkle ash at each doorway and mumble something under her breath. Protection, warding, maybe just habit. Either way, no one interrupts her. Historians still debate whether sagas were more historical or mythological. The truth? Both. To these people, there's no hard line between fact and fable. A story's value is not in its strict accuracy, but in its spirit. And tonight, you've contributed, even if it involved a slightly confused tortoise and some accidental divine retribution. Eventually, the story's quiet. The fire dies down. One by one, people slip into slumber. The longhouse breathes as one, a slow, collective exhale wrapped in fur and fatigue. You shift, trying to find a comfortable spot between a log and a snoring blacksmith. You adjust your cloak, nudge Thorstein back to his corner, and close your eyes. You think of Grettir and his ghost, of Loki the horse, and of a little tortoise who, against all odds, found his place. And maybe, just maybe, so have you. Section 13. Sleep, unfortunately, is not the reward it used to be. You drift off sometime after the last saga fades into the crackle of dying embers. Maybe you're even dreaming something about a sea serpent offering you porridge, but then it happens. The unmistakable sound of someone snoring like a war horn. Loud, wet, and absolutely unignorable. You crack one eye open. The blacksmith is the culprit. Mouth open, beard twitching, exhaling like a dragon with sinus problems. You shift. The floor creaks. Thorstein the chicken pecks at your ankle. You are, in short, very much awake again. Viking sleep arrangements are, shall we say, communal. There are no bedrooms, no mattresses, no memory foam. Just animal hides, straw-stuffed sacks, and the collective warmth and sounds of 12 other humans and a few roaming livestock. It's less cozy sleepover and more improvised people burrito with occasional clucking. You curl tighter into your cloak, trying to find a sweet spot between warm enough and not breathing in someone's foot steam. There isn't one. You settle for marginally less uncomfortable and practice your breathing. Then someone coughs, not a polite into-the-elbow cough, but a full-body something crawled down my throat, sort of hack. You hear someone shift, murmur something in Old Norse that sounds suspiciously like an ancient curse, and roll over with a thud. You do the same, less dramatically. Despite the snoring and shuffling, the atmosphere is strangely peaceful. It's a sort of living quiet, where sleep isn't perfect, but everyone accepts it. Even the interruptions become part of the rhythm. The snores, the crackling of cooling embers, the occasional creak of the timber roof expanding in the cold. You finally drift again, only to be awakened again by the call of nature. And we're not talking about poetic stars and forests. It's cold. The latrine is far. Your dignity is low. You weigh your options. Eventually, with great reluctance, you unwrap yourself and tiptoe past sleeping bodies and the vulva, who is somehow still upright in the corner, eyes closed, but definitely listening. You make your way outside, into a frigid night that wraps around you like ice-soaked linen. The stars above are astonishing. Unobstructed by city lights, they stretch in every direction, shimmering over snow-frosted rooftops. You pause, breath-forming clouds, marveling at how small and oddly significant you feel. Then a gust of wind reminds you why you're out here. You return to the longhouse, shivering, stepping gingerly over outstretched limbs and the goat that has somehow found its way inside. Again. You nestle back into your spot, careful not to disturb Thorstein. He pecks you anyway, just once. For the principle of it. Morning eventually creeps in, not with an alarm or a sunrise. Clouds smother any such drama, but with movement, shifting, coughing, muted conversation. Someone restarts the fire, and a thin thread of smoke curls up to the soot-darkened rafters. You stretch, every joint protesting like rusty hinges. You slept, technically. You're not rested, but you survived. Historians note that Viking sleep was often segmented. First sleep, then a period of wakefulness, then second sleep. During that middle time, people might pray, think, even talk quietly. You lived that experience, not by choice, but still. One quirky fact: some long houses were designed with benches around the perimeter for sleeping, while others simply piled straw and pelts near the fire. Yours is the latter, more intimate, less breathable. You stand, brush straw from your face, and attempt to reorient yourself to consciousness. Freydis walks past, carrying a pot. She grunts in your direction. That's probably a good morning. You survived your first full Viking night. Barely. As you rub your eyes, someone hands you a wooden cup with a warm drink inside. Thin beer, likely, or possibly mushroom broth. You sip, grateful for anything that isn't snow. Then, just as you're beginning to enjoy the faint warmth on your fingers, someone mutters those familiar words, "Time to work." Because in the Viking village, morning isn't a restart, it's a continuation. Section 14. The day begins without ceremony, without fanfare, just the thump of boots against packed dirt, the scrape of wooden tools, and a soft groan from your back as you stand up. Your joints sound like they're trying to leave your body. Someone thrusts a shovel into your hands. "We dig today," they say. Oh, good. You're led to a small plot of land just beyond the outer fence of the village. The earth here is hard, frozen in places, wet in others, and filled with stones that feel personally offended by your presence. Still, you dig, or try to. Your shovel hits a root and vibrates up into your skull. You try again and again. Turns out, today's task is repairing drainage ditches, because when it rains here, and it will rain, it doesn't politely soak into the ground, it floods, and with winter approaching fast, water that doesn't drain becomes ice that doesn't melt. Frozen soil means no planting, no walking, and no comfort. You learn this from a man named Ulf who has 2 teeth, the strength of an ox and the storytelling habits of a caffeinated bard. As you dig beside him, he recounts the time a ditch collapsed during a storm and flooded a longhouse, sending 5 chickens, 1 goat, and a pair of very confused twins floating downriver. You laugh. He doesn't. You're not sure if that means it's true. As the work continues, your hands develop new blisters in places you didn't know had skin, your arms burn, your legs ache, and your boots are now two fully functioning mud delivery systems. During a break, you perch on a log, panting. A young boy offers you a strip of dried fish. You accept it with gratitude, then nearly dislocate your jaw trying to chew it. The boy just smiles and keeps gnawing his own like it's a delicious licorice stick. You begin to realize something. The hard part of Viking life isn't the danger. It's the consistency of the hardship. The way discomfort isn't an event. It's a background hum like the wind or the smoke. You don't overcome it, you accept it. Historians suggest this is part of what made Viking communities so resilient. Everyone worked, everyone shared. There was no retirement plan, no off-season. Life was the job. Eventually, you're sent back to the village to fetch more tools. You limp toward the storage shed, past a group of teenagers practicing spear throws. One of them gestures at you to join. You do. You immediately trip over your own cloak and nearly impale a tree. They cheer anyway. You're not sure if it's supportive or ironic. A woman near the forge is weaving wire into chain links, not for jewelry, for armor. She lets you try. You make one ring. It takes you 10 minutes and your thumb goes numb. She makes 5 in that time and tells you, with a grin, maybe socks are more your speed. Back at the ditch, you try to keep up. The sun is high, though you can't see it. Just a soft gray glow through cloud-thick skies. Your breath steams, your back aches, the mud clings. One quirky tradition you hear about during lunch, a light, mostly silent affair of chewy bread and pickled root vegetables, is that some villages use to name their tools. You're handed a spade called Scraling's End. You don't ask. You just dig. Later, you're rewarded, kind of. Someone drops a half-burned hunk of pine resin into your palm. For your skin, they say. You rub it on the raw patches where your gloves failed. It smells like smoke and tree sap, and stings like betrayal, but it does work. As the ditch takes shape, the village children arrive with woven baskets, filling them with dirt and hauling them away like tiny, soot-smeared ants. One of them throws a snowball at you. It hits your neck. You flinch. Everyone laughs. You make a snowball in retaliation, but as you wind up to throw, you slip in the mud and land squarely on your tailbone. The laughter doubles, and somehow, lying there in a puddle, cold and covered in yesterday's stew remnants, you start laughing too. Historians still argue about the line between hardship and harmony in Viking life. Was it grim survival, or a rugged joy in endurance? You're starting to suspect it's both. The work continues slowly. The ditch becomes deeper, wider, functional. Water seeps in and moves. That's a win. When the final spadeful is tossed, someone pats your shoulder. Ulf, the two-toothed ox, grins at you and says something that sounds like "not bad, cheese shield." You nod. Not bad at all. And as you trudge back to the village, covered in mud, pain, and an odd sense of accomplishment, you realize this. Viking life doesn't get easier, but you're getting stronger. Section 15. The sky is dimming again. Another Viking day. Survived. Barely. You limp back into the longhouse, one boot squelching louder than the other, a thin crust of dried mud now fused to your legs like a new kind of armor. You drop onto the bench with a sigh so deep it startles the goat by the door. Thorstein the chicken hops up beside you and settles in like a judgmental cat. You're too tired to care. Evening in the village is quieter now, not because the people are less lively, but because the work has quieted them. This is the hush after the final chore, the gentle taper of effort. You're handed a bowl of soup. It's mostly turnips and maybe a bit of salted fish. You slurp it gratefully, barely tasting it. Everything tastes like victory now. Outside, you can hear the first crackles of frost settling into the earth. Winter is nearly here. You can feel it in your bones. Literally, your joints creak like old doors. Your fingers are stiff. Your nose hasn't been fully warm since midday. You ask Fridas if the winter gets much worse. She looks up from sharpening a bone needle and says only, "It's not winter yet." Excellent. Winter in a Viking village wasn't just a season, it was a siege. Snow piled high, roofs sagged under ice, and darkness swallowed most of the daylight. Days shrank into slivers, nights stretched endlessly. You understand suddenly why the hearth is the soul of the longhouse. Without it, everything would freeze, including you. There's no central heating, of course, just fire, fur, and human proximity. You shift closer to the flames, grateful for the heat, even if it carries a faint smell of singed beard from your earlier brush with a cooking pot. You wonder how people here prepared for the cold. You're told that all through autumn they dried herbs, smoked meat, patched clothes, sealed roofs with turf and tar. No task was unimportant. A leaky roof in December isn't an inconvenience, it's a danger. Even now, someone's darning socks. Another person stitching patches onto a cloak. It's like a living machine, every villager a gear, keeping the whole thing from freezing to a stop. You want to help. You pick up a wool mitten and try to sew a loose seam. It ends badly. You manage to pierce your thumb twice and somehow tie a knot so permanent it might outlast the gods. Freydis gently takes the mitten from you. She doesn't scold, just starts over. Someone begins another story, softer this time. It's about a girl who turned into a reindeer during the longest night of the year. You're not sure if it's a warning or a compliment, but no one seems worried. Thorstein falls asleep on your foot. You don't dare move. Historians still debate how psychologically taxing winters were for Viking villagers. There's no diary from 983 AD that says, "I'm sad and I miss the sun." But they knew hardship. They expected it. And in some strange way, they embraced it. With laughter, with stories, with thick soup and occasional goat theft. You reach into your belt and find the little bone token the Völva gave you. You turn it over in your hand, tracing the spiral etched into it. Maybe it was a blessing, maybe a joke, or maybe, just maybe, she knew you'd need something to hold on to. Outside, snow begins to fall, software silent, relentless. You're given your sleeping spot again. Same straw, same fur, slightly less pokey than last night. You slide in beside the others, cocooned by warmth and exhaustion. Someone blows out the last torch. The darkness is complete, except for the fire. The little ember glow, flickering steady, and in that warm, cramped, smoke-scented silence, something changes. The aches in your muscles fade. The anxiety melts. Your breath slows. You are still cold, still sore, still out of place, but less so. Just enough to feel like you're part of something ancient, something human. You close your eyes, and now, with the longhouse quiet and the snow curling soft ribbons across the rooftop, you can finally let go. Outside, the frost thickens its grip on the earth. The chickens are asleep. The goats have stopped complaining. Even the wind has quieted. Just a low hum in the trees, like a lullaby played on branches. Inside, the fire burns low but steady, casting flickering shadows against timber walls that have seen centuries of nights just like this one. Your fur blanket, still itchy, still lumpy, feels less like an inconvenience and more like protection. The people around you breathe in rhythm, their sleep-deep sighs rising and falling like slow tides. No voices, no chores, no questions, only warmth, darkness, stillness. And so, you lie there, eyes closed, hands folded near your chest, the weight of the day settling into the floor beneath you. You made it through a full day in a Viking village, a place as unforgiving as it is unforgettable. Your body hurts, but your mind is soft now. Your thoughts slower, gentler, like snow falling into silence. Let yourself sink into it. Let the fire hum you to sleep. Let the stories drift through your dreams of warriors and wanderers, goats and gods, frost giants and chicken sidekicks named Thorstein. You're safe here just for tonight. Tomorrow will come with more work, more cold, and maybe more porridge. But for now, sleep, sleep, little shield bearer, sleep like a Northman.